Hi guys, welcome to Faith Stories with Habi. So today we're just gonna get right into it. We're gonna be learning obedience from the story of the wise men in the Bible. If you're familiar with this story, I'm so sorry that I am saying and repeating something that you already know. If you're not familiar with this story, then you can find it in the book of Matthew, chapter 2. I think starting from verse 1, you'll find the story of the wise men there. But in this video, I'm just going to do a quick recap of the story so that we have an idea what I'm talking about. So the wise men in the Bible, though we're used to calling them the three wise men, which I don't know why, maybe because they just gave Jesus three gifts. So, but the Bible was not very was not specific of the number of men that they were. So I don't know why we find them to be three. The story of the wise men in the Bible is a story of some men that were looking for Jesus. So they went out to Jerusalem to ask about where Jesus was. This was the time where King Herod was still king. The wise men got to Jerusalem and was asking around for where Jesus was. So the people told them that the prophet of old had already said that Jesus was going to be born in Bethlehem in Judea. King Herod heard that these men were in town and he asked them to come over for a private meeting. They went over to him and he was asking them, have you found him? They said no, they've not found him yet. So he told them that whenever they find Jesus, he would like to know because he also wanted to worship Jesus. Unknowing to them, King Herod was actually looking for Jesus so that he could kill him. For whatever demonic reason there is, he wanted to kill Jesus because he felt like Jesus was going to challenge his power as the king of the Jews. Imagine a baby that is even yet to speak, but there are already demonic forces that are trying to stop him from growing just because they feel threatened by his existence. Anyway, so the wise men went their way, and the Bible recorded that there was a star that just guided them to where Jesus was. And so they found Jesus. They gave him the gift of, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and they left. But something stood out to me in that entire story. It was the last part. God appeared to the wise men in the dream and warned them not to go back to Herod. So he warned them to avoid Herod on their return journey. And that instruction was very crucial. And that part stuck out to me because that act of obedience from the wise men was very crucial to protecting Jesus' life. Imagine for a minute that they disobeyed and they had gone back to tell Herod that, oh, we found him. He's somewhere in Bethlehem and we know where he is. Imagine, just for a minute, imagine that Herod would have likely discovered Jesus and attempted to kill him. This would have altered the course of history of salvation for mankind and prevented Jesus from fulfilling his mission here on earth. And some of the things I learned from it was this, obeying God even when it's unclear and inconvenient, just choosing to obey God, and also protecting God's plan, even if it means taking alternate routes and making sacrifices. By being obedient to God, we demonstrate faith and surrender. We're surrendering ourselves to God, we're surrendering ourselves to His plan. And one thing I want us to note about obedience today is that obedience most of the time might not have the reward of obedience might not have something to do with us on a personal level. Look at the wise men. It wasn't like God was telling them to obey because maybe if they go back to Herod was going to kill them, or maybe there was something on the road that was going to eat them up if they went through that route. But the reward of their obedience was in salvation of mankind. It wasn't necessarily something that had to do with them directly or on a personal level, but it was something that had to do with the world at large. A couple of days ago, when God first directed my heart to this passage, the story was very unclear. I woke up in the morning and that was the first thing that came to my mind. Go and read the story of the wise men. And I picked up my Bible and I read it. And even when I read it, I was like, what am I supposed to learn from this? To be honest, though, that's what this question that I was asking. I was like, Holy Spirit, what am I learning from this? Because I've read this story over and over and over again. I just read it. I meditated on it for a while and I just left it. Not until 2 days after, the Bible plan I was reading together with my husband was somehow the story of the wise men was spoken about there. It was just as I was reading it that it came to mind what lesson God was trying to let me learn from it. When God teaches me something, I believe that it teaches me, it pours into me just so that I can pour out. I think here we're looking at obedience from a selfless point of view. We're looking at obedience from a point where our reward might not in itself be on a personal level. Because it's very easy for you now. If God says, go and take a walk, go and take a walk, as you're coming back, you're going to meet somebody in the road that's going to give you money. That way, that act of obedience adds personal gain from it, right? But there are some act of obedience that God will ask of us that we would not have personal reward from it, immediate personal reward from it. And I feel like that's one of the things we have to learn to yield ourselves to as Christians. I believe that because of how curious we are as Christians, our heart is always wanting to understand why. Even when we talk about things, when we do things, we hear ourselves talk about, oh, I have to do things. If I'm doing things, it has to be purposeful. There has to be a reason why I'm doing it. We want to attach purpose to the things that we do, which is good, which is great. But somehow that can come at a disadvantage in obeying God. Because now God is asking you to do something. And from where you're sitting, you can't really see why He wants you to do that thing. From where you're sitting, you're thinking, why should I do this? I don't see any benefit it's going to accrue to me if I do it. I'm here today to encourage us that we have to learn to give ourselves in obedience to God for a purpose greater than us, for God's ultimate plan. We have to be ready for God to use us as an instrument for His greater plan in the world here on earth. We have to see obedience from a selfless point of view. We don't have to think of obedience as something that we're going to always gain a personal reward from. We have to come to a place where we are okay with not understanding why. Just obey. A lot of time you want to do things that are purposeful, but it is purpose enough that God is asking you to do something. The purpose is not in understanding why. The purpose is in God asking you to do it. We have to let the fact that it is God telling us to do certain things be enough reason why we do it. A lot of times, God can put something in our heart for us to do, but because we cannot really rationalize why He's asking us to do it, we think that maybe it's not God talking to us, or we think that there's no purpose in it. Now we idolize understanding far more than we idolize the instructions of God. We always want to know why, because that's where we get purpose from, right? Because when they ask you what purpose is, they'll say that purpose is the reason why something exists. Purpose is the reason why something is done, right? And that, in a sense, which is correct, that is good, but that in a sense can come in between us and our obedience to God. Look at the heroes of faith in the Bible that we can find in Hebrews 11. Look at when the Bible talked about them. It said they had faith even though they didn't receive the promises of God. So these people acted in faith, they acted in obedience, even though they didn't have any personal gain from it, even though they didn't even receive the promise, but they understood that they were just an instrument in the grand scheme of things. They were instruments in the whole of God's ultimate plan. So they did their part. They knew that, okay, we had to do our own part. So they did their part. So what I'm encouraging us to do today is to have a selfless approach to obedience. What God is asking you to do at the particular time in life does not necessarily mean that you're going to get a personal reward from it. It might be for the sake of your neighbors. It might be for the sake of your children. It might be for the sake of your husband. It might be for the sake of a long lost relative. It might be for the sake of your church. It might be for the sake of your community. It might be for the sake of your country. It might be for the sake of people you've never even met. It might be for the sake of the entire world at large. When we open up ourselves to be used by God, we should expect that He will use us for things that we have no understanding of sometimes. We give testimonies and we're like, oh, I obeyed God and this happened for me. I obeyed God and this happened for me. Which is good, do you understand? But sometimes you obey God and you just did, and that's it. Find satisfaction in just obeying God. Find satisfaction in knowing that you've done what God wanted you to do and you're sure that He's pleased with you. Because sometimes it's not about you. The heroes of faith were not acting in obedience because they wanted to see the result and the reward at the moment. They were acting in faith and obedience because they knew that God's ultimate plan was bigger than them, and they knew that they were just passing the baton to the generations to come. They knew they were instruments into the fulfillment of something greater, right? Your act of obedience today might even be for the generations to come, and you would not even be alive to witness it. We need to stop being selfish about our outlook to obedience. So this week, ask God to help you to be obedient. Ask Him to help you to see and look beyond yourself. Ask Him to just help you to act in faith, bearing in mind that you are His ambassador here on earth. Okay. Well, that was quite intense for me. I'm so grateful to God that I get to share this with you guys. Just have a lovely week, and I just pray that God expands your heart and expands your capacity to be obedient and help you to see way beyond yourself. God bless you. Lots of love. Have a wonderful week. See you in my next video. Bye.